Say it again.
Chinelo said. Her voice did not shake, and that surprised her more than anything else that had happened that day.
Say your name again, slowly this time.
Nello, please.
Don't call me that.
She lifted one gloved hand, and the small room went silent, as if even the walls were listening for what came next.
10 years, Amaka. 10 years I called you my sister. So before I walk back through that door and become somebody's wife, you will do one thing for me. Just one. Tell me your name. Your real one.
The woman across from her, the maid of honor in matching emerald aso ebi, the woman who had held Chinelo's hand through 3 funerals, 1 eviction, and every hungry month between, opened her mouth and closed it again. For the first time in a decade, the woman who had never once lost her composure could not find her voice. The music from the reception kept playing through the wall, over 240 guests waiting under an ivory and gold canopy in Owerri for the bride to come back and cut her cake. None of them knew that 6 feet away, behind a door tied shut with gold ribbon, 10 years had just come apart. Amaka Eze had been Chinelo Okafor's best friend for a decade. For every single year of it, she had also been somebody else entirely. My people, before we talk about what broke, we must first talk about what was built, and who did the building. Chinelo Okafor grew up in a house where the generator rarely needed to run, because on her father's compound in Owerri, the light rarely went out in the first place. Her father, Chief Emeka Okafor, built Okafor Prints and Publications, from one rented shop into one of the most respected printing houses in Imo State. Church bulletins, textbooks, wedding invitations, campaign posters. If you needed something printed with dignity in that city, you went to Chief Okafor and you paid what he asked, because his work was worth it. He was proud, never hard. He paid his workers on the 5th of every month, before rent, before fees, before anything else could touch that money. He called his only daughter my chief accountant before she could add 2 numbers, and let her stamp old invoices with his company's seal like it was the best game in the world. Chinelo grew up believing 3 things: that her father's word was worth more than most men's signatures, that the Okafor name opened doors in that town, and that nothing could touch a family built as honestly as his. She was wrong about that 3rd one, and the man who proved it was a regular guest at that table, laughing at her father's jokes for 15 years. Every kingdom, my people, has a man standing close enough to see how it was built, and far enough from the building of it to believe he deserves a bigger piece. In Chief Okafor's kingdom, that man was Chief Duru. They had been partners almost 15 years, close enough that Duru handled distribution contracts, sat in on every board discussion, and held a spare set of keys to the building. Chief Okafor called him my brother in public, and never once asked to see the small print on anything Duru brought him to sign, because in 15 years Duru had never given him a reason to. That, if you want betrayal in one sentence, is exactly how it works. It is almost never the stranger who ruins you. It is the man who has already earned the right to stop being questioned. Over 18 quiet months, the way a termite works a beam from the inside until the house still looks strong the morning it gives way, Chief Duru forged signatures on transfer documents, redirected 2 of the company's biggest contracts through a shell company in his cousin's name, and drained the accounts through invoices for services never rendered. Then, using a forged power of attorney, he transferred the title of the Douglas Road building itself into his own name at the land's registry. Chief Okafor found out the way small business owners often find out that everything is gone. He arrived at his own building one Tuesday to find 2 security men he had never hired at his own gate, telling him the property was under new management. He called Duru's phone 11 times that day. Duru answered on the 12th.
Emeka, my brother, business is business. You will find another shop.
Then he ended the call and never picked up again. By the time Chief Okafor found a lawyer willing to take the case, there was almost nothing left. The accounts were empty, the building had new locks, and that lawyer told him that fighting a forged deed already registered in another man's name, against a man with Duru's new money and new friends, could take 10 years and everything he had left. with nothing waiting at the end of it. Chief Okafor did not survive the shame long enough to find out if that lawyer was right. 8 months after discovering the fraud, in a rented parlor that still smelled of another family's cooking, he suffered a stroke reading a letter from that same lawyer, advising him to let the matter rest. He never fully recovered his speech. He died 4 months later, almost exactly a year after the fraud came to light. A man who had built something remarkable with his own 2 hands and watched one forged signature erase it in under 2 years. I need you to understand what losing everything actually looked like for that family, because it is easy to say the words and feel nothing from them. Chinelo was 19, 1 year into a private university degree her father had paid in full. Within 6 months of his death, all of it was gone. She transferred to a state university across town, and she and her mother moved into a single room in a face me, I face you compound, where the landlord came around on the 2nd of every month like a debt collector, because that, to him, was exactly what he had become. Her mother, who once ran a tailoring business for enjoyment, now ran it for survival. Chinelo sold what jewelry her mother could bear to part with and took a job serving food in a canteen near her new campus, in the same kind of apron she had once looked at on other girls, with a pity she was now ashamed of. One Tuesday, a family from her old street came through that line and looked straight through her. A girl behind a counter, no longer the same girl who once arrived at parties in her father's car. She gave them their change and did not cry until they were gone. She studied at night with a rechargeable lamp because the light in that compound went more often than it stayed. And whenever some old family friend asked, with false sympathy,
"So, is nothing being done about the case?"
she learned to change the subject fast, because the people with enough money to fight for justice had somehow become exactly the people the money had been stolen from. That is where we find her, my people. 19 years old, tired in a way 19-year-olds should never be tired, when a new girl walked into her hostel corridor one evening and changed the direction of the rest of her life. Her name, as Chinelo knew it, was Amaka Eze, a transfer student, she said, from a college in Abuja, looking for a roommate to split the cost of a better room off campus. She was warm in a way that felt instant and total, the kind of warmth that either means a person has an enormous heart or a person has a plan. At 19, grieving and lonely, Chinelo had no reason yet to wonder which one it was.
I feel like we were meant to be sisters.
Amaka told her 3 weeks after they met, the night she found Chinelo crying over a textbook chapter she could not afford to photocopy. Amaka paid for it herself, waved off the thanks, and kept doing things like that for 10 years. Small loans that were never really loans because she never asked for them back. A shoulder at both the burial and the memorial that followed. A voice on the phone at 2 in the morning whenever Chinelo could not sleep for missing a house that no longer existed. She was there for every exam period, with roasted corn and encouragement that always sounded exactly like what Chinelo needed to hear. When Chinelo got her first design job and had nothing to wear to the interview, Amaka arrived the night before with a borrowed blazer that fit perfectly. Everybody who knew Chinelo said the same thing. Whatever else that girl had lost, God had blessed her with one true friend. Her mother called Amaka my second daughter, and meant it. At Chinelo's introduction ceremony years later, half the hall expected Amaka to break down before reaching the microphone because everyone present had watched them walk through the worst decade of Chinelo's life side by side. My people, hold this thought because I need you to see it clearly before I take it apart. A friend who arrives exactly when you are at your weakest, who never asks anything of you, who makes herself so useful and so warm you cannot picture surviving without her. That is not always a blessing that landed on your life by accident. Sometimes it is a plan that landed on your life on purpose. For 10 years, Amaka did something so quiet, so wrapped in the language of care that Chinelo never once recognized it as control. In year 2, a local newspaper mentioned the Douglas Road building in a piece on unresolved land fraud cases, and Chinelo, hopeful again, wanted to find a lawyer to look at her father's case. Amaka talked her down that same night.
You have already lost so much. Let the dead rest. Face your future.
In year 3, a scholarship board in the United Kingdom shortlisted her for a fully funded transfer. And Amaka, with a loving list of reasons it was a terrible idea, the visa stress, the cold, the mother she would be leaving behind, talked her out of that too. And in year 4, a law student named Kelechi, who had offered to fight her father's case for free, quietly disappeared from her life over rumors she could never trace to a source. She never thought to ask who had been whispering, until there was no one left to whisper about. If a name just walked into your mind, a friend, a cousin, a well-wisher who always has a loving reason why you shouldn't chase the bigger opportunity, why you shouldn't reopen the old case, why you shouldn't fully trust the new person who has been good to you, type "still small" in the comments right now. Because sometimes the clearest sign a person has been managing your whole life is that every piece of advice they give you, however loving it sounds, always ends with you staying exactly where you already were. By the time Chinelo turned 29, she had built something small but entirely her own out of the wreckage her father left behind. A modest graphic design and printing studio in Owerri, doing on a laptop and one good machine what her father once did with a warehouse full of them. It was there, designing invitations for another woman's introduction ceremony, that she met Tobenna Tobenna was not a flashy man, and that is what first convinced Chinelo he might be real. An engineer working between Owerri and Abuja, the kind of man who paid his own bills on time and did not need an audience to do the right thing. He courted her slowly, met her mother early, and asked hard, direct questions about her father's story, instead of changing the subject the way almost everyone else had learned to do. Questions that made her cry the first time, not from pain, but from the relief of finally being asked at all.
Somebody should look at that case again one day,
He told her once, quietly, in the tone of a man who intends to act on a thing rather than simply say it to sound kind. For once, she let herself imagine it. When Tobenna proposed, there was only one person Chinelo wanted standing beside her at the altar in the way that mattered. Not simply as a bridesmaid, but as her maid of honor, the woman she believed had earned that place across 10 hard years. Amaka cried when she was asked. Everybody assumed it was joy. Only one person in that room had any reason to wonder what those tears were actually made of, and she was the one crying them. I want to ask you something honestly, my people. Have you ever mistaken a person managing your life for a person loving it? Those two things can look almost identical from the outside, and only real time ever tells you which one you were living inside of. If that question landed somewhere honest in you, drop "I was managed too" in the comments. You are far from the only one tonight. The wedding took place on a bright Saturday in Owerri, the traditional ceremony already done the week before, the white wedding bringing both families together under an ivory and gold canopy. Tobenna's father, a retired judge everyone called Barrister Nwosu, sat in the front row. A meticulous man who had spent close to 40 years reading fine print for a living, and never quite managed to stop, even at his own son's party. After the church service, the bridal party moved to a side room to sign the marriage register, a formality most guests never notice. 2 witnesses, their full legal names entered onto a certificate that would outlive everyone in that hall. The best man signed first, barely glancing at the form. Then it was the maid of honor's turn. The registrar asked, as she asks every witness, for identification to enter the correct legal name onto the certificate. For 1/2 of 1 second, so brief that only a man trained for 4 decades to notice such hesitation would have caught it, the maid of honor's hand paused over the pen. Barrister Nwosu stood close enough to see the passport she finally produced, and close enough to read above a photograph that looked precisely like the young woman in front of him, a name that was not Amaka Eze. The name on that passport was Amarachi Duru. Barrister Nwosu did not react. 40 years on the bench teach a man exactly how much a raised eyebrow costs. But somewhere in his memory, something had already begun turning over, the way an old engine turns before it catches. He knew that surname. Not vaguely. Precisely. Years earlier, before people called him barrister the way you'd call a chief, a grieving widow and her 19-year-old daughter, this same Chinelo, though he would not place the face for a few more minutes, had come to his chambers about a printing company stolen from under a dead man's name. He remembered the name of the man accused, because it struck him even then as too fitting. A man named Duru, who had walked away from it all untouched. And he remembered one photograph, years before even that, of this same Chief Duru proudly introducing a young daughter by name. Amarachi. Barrister Nwosu said nothing during the photographs, and nothing on the drive to the hall. But when the car stopped and his son stepped out to help his new wife down, the old man asked for one private minute before the grand entrance.
I may be wrong.
He told them both quietly, the DJ's voice thumping faintly from inside.
God knows I hope I am wrong. But I need you to look at something before you walk through that door, Chinelo. Because if I am right, you are about to spend the rest of your life married into a family that let you walk into your own reception without telling you what we already know.
Tobenna, to his great credit, and I want you to notice this, my people, because a weaker man does the opposite, did not tell his father to keep the peace for another day. He did not tell his bride to smile through it and deal with it later. He took her hand, looked at his father's face, and said one thing.
Show her.
That, in one word, is the whole difference between a man who marries a woman for what she can give him and a man who marries her for who she actually is. Chinelo looked at the photocopy her father-in-law held out. She read the name twice. Then she looked up once across the courtyard at the woman still laughing with the bridesmaids in matching emerald, adjusting Chinelo's own veil in a car window's reflection barely an hour before. And something in her chest went so cold and still that she would later call it, not shock exactly, but a question finally being answered that she had never known to ask. She did not scream, she did not cry, not yet. She smoothed the front of her gown the way her mother had taught her to smooth it before any aisle, and asked her husband and her father-in-law for exactly one thing.
Give me 5 minutes with her, alone.
This, my people, is where we came in. The music from the reception was still playing when Chinelo pulled Amaka into that small room and shut the door, looping the loose gold ribbon around the handle without registering why. 240 guests sat waiting, unaware the bride they wanted back was standing 3 feet from the woman she had once called her sister, asking her, a second time, to say her own name.
Nello, please, whatever you think you saw in there.
I don't think anything, Amaka. I read it. Amarachi Duru.
She said the surname slowly, the way you press a bruise to test how deep it goes.
Tell me that's a coincidence. Tell me there are 2 Duru families in this state and yours has nothing to do with the man who destroyed my father. Tell me that, and I will believe it, because God knows I have believed everything you told me for 10 straight years.
Amaka said nothing at all, and in the silence of a woman who had always had exactly the right words ready, Chinelo finally heard the truth, louder than any confession could have spoken it.
How long?
Chinelo asked quietly.
Were you sent?
The word sent broke something open. Amaka's shoulders dropped, and the poised, endlessly patient chief bridesmaid disappeared. And what stood in her place looked, for the first time in 10 years, exactly her age, and exactly as frightened as anyone finally caught at the end of a very long lie.
My father found out, the year after yours died, that one document could still undo everything he had built.
Amaka said, so quietly Chinelo had to lean in to catch it.
the original partnership deed, with both the real signatures, notarized before he ever forged the transfer. If it ever surfaced with a lawyer willing to fight, everything he took could be taken back. He knew your family had it among your father's files. He needed someone close to you, someone you would never suspect, someone who could find it and make sure you never went looking yourself.
So you became my sister.
Her voice cracked.
For 10 years, so your father could sleep at night.
It was not only that.
Amaka was crying now.
It started as an assignment, Nello. But I watched you lose your father, your house, almost your mind. And I was actually there, even if the reason I first showed up was never real. Does none of that count for anything?
You cleaned out my father's office.
It was not a question anymore. Chinelo remembered it now, piece by piece. One of the kindest things anyone had ever done for her.
You told me you were helping me grieve. You were searching his papers.
Amaka did not deny it. Her silence was the last document in this case, and it was the only one Chinelo still needed.
I found it in the third box.
Amaka said.
A brown envelope tied with twine, exactly where a careful man keeps something he is afraid of losing. I gave it to my father that same week. Your case died 2 months later, and nobody ever thought to suspect me.
Did you ever think of telling me? In 10 years, not once?
Amaka wiped her face with the back of one gloved hand.
Twice.
She said.
Once, the year you almost took that scholarship, when part of me thought you deserved to be free of it, including me. And once at your introduction, watching you glow, thinking, she deserves the truth, even if it costs me everything. Both times I told myself it would destroy you more than it would help.
If you are still watching tonight, ask yourself something honest, my people. Have you ever discovered that someone's love for you started out as a job? Not maybe, actually started, on one specific day, for one specific reason, long before it became whatever it eventually turned into. Type "the assignment" in the comments if this story has already made you think of one person you need to look at differently tonight. Chinelo stood in that room with a decade collapsing quietly around her, and felt, for the first time since her father's funeral, something close to total defeat. If the one document that could save his name and recover his company was truly gone, this confession had changed nothing except her own understanding of the last 10 years. Her father would still be a disgraced dead man. Chief Duru would still be untouched. It was Tobenna outside that door with his father who thought to ask the question that changed everything.
Chinelo's father had an accountant.
He said quietly.
An old man, invited today at Chinelo's own request. If anyone kept honest records of how that company ran its books, it would be him.
That old man was Pa Namdi, sitting at table 14 with a plate of jollof rice. He had worked for Chief Okafor for 11 years before the fraud, and loved him the way you love someone who paid you fairly and trusted you completely, in a business were rare. When Tobenna found him and asked him quietly to come, Pa Namdi rose without a single question because in 11 years he had learned that when an Okafor needed him urgently, they never asked twice. He listened to everything. He did not look surprised. Instead, he reached into the old leather bag he carried everywhere, the one people teased him about for years, calling it his coffin because he refused to be parted from it even at parties, and pulled out a folded certificate, soft at the creases from a decade of handling.
Your father was a careful man, even in the years he trusted too much.
Pa Namdi said.
After the second year of that partnership, he insisted, over Duru's objections, that a certified true copy of every partnership deed and every set of company books be lodged permanently at the land's registry, and a duplicate ledger kept separately with me of the premises, updated every quarter, because he did not like doing business on promises alone, not even with a man he called his brother.
He held the papers out with both hands, the way an elder hands over something heavier than its weight.
They took the original because they never knew a shadow of it existed anywhere else. I have kept my copy for 10 years, my daughter, waiting for the day someone would finally ask me for it. I only knew that if that day came, I intended to still be alive to hand it over myself.
My people, notice carefully what Chinelo did next, because it is the whole reason I am telling you this story instead of 100 others just like it. She did not run into that reception hall and expose Amaka in front of 240 guests. She did not scream, did not throw the passport photocopy in her face, did not let 10 years of buried grief detonate into a spectacle Chief Duru's lawyers could later twist into an unstable bride making wild accusations at her own wedding. She had already lost one fight to a man with better lawyers and more patience than she had at 19. She was not losing this one the same way. She folded Pa Namdi's documents into her mother's handbag for safekeeping and turned to the woman still standing in that room.
You will walk back into that hall with me.
Chinelo told her, and her voice, for the first time all day, sounded exactly like her father's used to sound, closing a difficult negotiation.
You will smile. You will dance. You will let 200 people believe for one more night that Amaka Eze is still my sister, because I refuse to let you take this day the way your father took everything else. You already had 10 years. You are not getting today as well.
And after today?
Amaka asked very quietly.
After today, there is no more Amaka Eze. There is only Amarachi Duru, and everything her father did to build his life, and everything she did for 10 years to protect it. And I promise you, on the memory of a man who died believing the world had already taken everything it could, I am only just getting started finding out what else it left behind.
She walked back into that hall on her husband's arm, and if you had been sitting under that canopy, you would have seen nothing but a radiant bride cutting her cake, dancing her first dance with a man who held her like she was something rare. Nobody in that room, save 4 people, knew that the maid of honor smiling in every photograph had already been quietly, permanently finished. That, my people, is what real dignity under fire looks like. Not silence forever, not forgiveness in the heat of the moment. Just enough patience to let your enemy help you finish your own good day, before you go on to finish hers. In the months that followed, Barrister Nwosu connected Chinelo with a legal team specializing in decade-old property fraud. Pa Namdi's certified duplicate ledger, together with the land's registry's own untouched copy of the deed, were exactly what 10 years of silence had been waiting for. Paper trails, matching signatures, a registry stamp confirming a second legitimate deed had existed all along, filed years before Duru's forged transfer was ever recorded. The case everyone once told a grieving 19-year-old to let rest reopened with the full weight of proof behind it. Chief Duru discovered that a fraud case does not care how many chieftaincy titles a man collects, or how many church programs he funds to launder his name along with his money. Within a year, the courts voided the fraudulent transfer, restored the Douglas Road building to the Okafor name, and opened criminal proceedings against him for forgery that could no longer be waved away as an old rumor. Chief Okafor's name, dragged through 10 years of shame, was finally cleared. In the same city where he was once whispered about as disgraced, he was now called what he had always been: a man who was robbed, never a man who failed. Amaka, Amarachi, I should really call her now since that was always the truer name, did not go to prison the way her father eventually did. Her own part was harder to prove in a courtroom and gentler to punish under the law. But my people, some betrayals cost more than any court ever could. Word travels fast in a town the size of Owerri. Faster still when the story involves a bride, a wedding gown, and a decade of deception juicy enough to retell at every hair salon and church program for a year afterward. The woman who had been maid of honor at half the weddings in her own age grade was not invited to a single one the following year. The friends who once envied Chinelo her loyal sister now crossed the road rather than greet the woman who had built her identity on being exactly that. She called Chinelo exactly once, almost a year later.
I only wanted to say it out loud, that I am sorry. Not the version my father's lawyers would want, the real one.
Chinelo answered her gently.
I believe you, but it does not undo it. I am not angry anymore. I am simply done.
She ended the call and never heard from Amaka again. Some say she is in Port Harcourt now. Some say Lagos. Nobody who once called her a sister has bothered to find out for certain. And that silence, more than any sentence a judge could hand down, is the truest verdict this story has ever delivered. As for Pa Namdi, the old man who carried 10 years of quiet loyalty in a leather bag people teased him for refusing to put down, Chinelo did not let his faithfulness go unrewarded. When the Douglas Road building was restored, and the presses ran again under the Okafor name, it was Pa Namdi she asked to come out of retirement and oversee the books, on a salary she set herself, higher than he had ever earned, along with a small house in Owerri he would never again pay rent for.
You kept my father's promise alive for 10 years without anyone asking you to.
She told him the day she handed him the keys.
The least I can do is keep mine to you for the rest of them.
Chinelo learned something in that 10-year silence I want to leave with you before we close tonight, my people. Worth more than the property, more than the court judgment, more than watching Amarachi Duru's name disappear off every guest list in that city. She learned the real difference between being needed and being loved. For 10 years, she mistook one for the other, because they can wear the same clothes, use the same warm voice, cry at the same funerals. Being needed keeps you small enough to always need managing. Being loved wants you to grow so large you no longer need managing at all. Tobenna, who said only 2 words outside that room, "Show her," when he could have chosen comfort over truth. That is what being loved looks like. Amaka, who spent a decade making herself indispensable so Chinelo would never ask a hard question. That is what being needed looks like. Dressed up so well it took 10 years and a passport and a side room to finally tell the two apart. Today, the presses on Douglas Road run again, under a sign that reads, Okafor Prints and Publications. Chinelo runs it herself now, her father's old company seal cleaned and polished on her own desk. Every year, on the anniversary of a wedding day that could have broken her, she and Tobenna post a small dinner for exactly 3 people, her mother, Pa Namdi, and the husband who chose her over comfort when it actually mattered. If this story moved you tonight, do one simple thing for me before you go anywhere else. Subscribe and join this family properly, because we are only getting bigger, and there is room here for everyone watching from wherever in this world you currently call home. Drop your city and your country in the comments right now, from Lagos to London, from Accra to Atlanta, from Nairobi to New York. I want to see exactly how far this family stretches tonight, and before you go anywhere, look at your screen because there is already another story waiting for you right on your screen right now. Another Chinelo, another Amaka, another quiet decade about to come undone. My people, they say a stranger who wears your sister's face for 10 years is still, in the end, only ever a stranger. Truth does not need to shout, and truth is never in a hurry, because truth already knows how every story ends. It will sit quietly for as long as it has to, in a leather bag, in a locked registry drawer, in one old man's faithful memory. And on the day it finally decides to speak, it will speak louder than every lie that ever tried to outlive it. Until next time, my people, guard your peace, guard your circle closely, and never again mistake the hands that kept you small for the hands that were always meant to hold you.